What is up, everybody, and welcome to the All-NBA show powered by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet at FanDuel.com/AllNBA. I'm your host, Adam Moeses. Tim Legler has the week off, man. He's been traveling East Coast, West Coast, North, South, all over the last couple of weeks, so he's got a couple of days off. He'll be back with us on Thursday, but I got my guy from the low man help, Mark Campbell. Mark, how you doing today?
Yeah, I'm doing pretty well. Thanks for having me.
You are our permanent sub.
Oh, man.
That's like to lend it from Mark Dagnott last night.
Way to set me up to fail.
You know, it's funny. So we were joking about this coming in. We're going to talk. Today's show is going to be about 4 teams. And, you know, Mark's a brilliant basketball mind. I always love texting with you. Always love when you hop on the show. I always learn something from you and the stuff that you produce on your channel, as well as your writing. But here's the thing. We're going to talk about who you thought. You had 4 teams that you weren't just like, oh, these teams are okay, or, oh, they're kind of interesting. You're like, no, these teams that nobody's talking about, the Warriors, the Wolves, the Pacers, and the Bucks, they have a real shot. Maybe it's a puncher's chance, but you believe they have a real shot at upsetting the tier 1 teams in the NBA and maybe going all the way.
Yeah, I think that there's something about playoff basketball that's a little bit different than regular season. And I think we've seen over the past couple of years with Miami a couple of times, with Dallas last year, sometimes you get into these series and a lot of it's about how matchups break, and you might be the team that's just such a quagmire for one of the favorites and you happen to get them. And then it's one of those things where you just can't solve those problems and you keep pressing on them. So I think these 4 teams all have a little something to them that if they get in the right series and if they get it going, they can be a thorn in anybody's side and get to the finals.
I love it. We're going to go deep on all of those. I also just like the idea. I think that it can be overstated that playoff basketball is different from regular season basketball. I know I've talked to a lot of different front office people, analytics people, and they think that those changes, the difference between the two are overstated, but they're not necessarily overstated in terms of how teams match up. And is there something you can do to take a team out of their rhythm? It doesn't even mean you're necessarily a better team, but you can do the thing that team really struggles with, or vice versa. And I think that's what's different about the playoffs. It's not that it's necessarily faster or slower or more physical or this or that. Those things are marginally true. But if one team has one thing that you can't stop, all of a sudden it levels the playing field. And I think that's kind of the genesis of what you're getting at. But before we get into that, I have to just do quick layup lines here with you, because last night we had the rematch of the Thunder Nuggets game and it went completely different. In fact, the exact opposite, a close game back and forth. This time the Thunder lose a player in J-Dub in the second half, and the Nuggets carried it home and opened up the game in the fourth quarter. So just real quick, do you have a thought? Because I know I texted you after that first game and I'm like, man, I just don't know about this Nuggets team. And you do believe in the Nuggets team, and you were probably not surprised by how last night went.
Yeah, I think they're one of those teams that you can count on. They're going to solve the problems, and it's really going to be, this is overstated probably too much, it's a make or miss league. And I think Oklahoma City is going to fall into that category as well, where they're going to solve the problems and it'll be make or miss. But those 2 teams, they're just so intelligent and they have such tough heads of the snake where you have to be able to not leave them on an island, whether it's SGA or Jokic. So they're going to have these advantage options, and it's really going to come down to make or miss. But I think the Nuggets shored up a lot of the stuff that they gave away in the first matchup. They were really good when they had Jokic string out in SGA pick and roll, but when he got a little bit too stretched out and SGA was able to split in the first matchup, it was lights out. And SGA got there a lot of times. Second matchup, they really solved that problem by coming out, giving that same look that Minnesota gave them when they came back from 25 points and made it about all the other guys. So to me, the Nuggets are just one of those teams where you can always count on them to solve the problems. And I think seeing that back-to-back, you can see how teams will evolve and adjust when you get down to we're only playing this team over and over again.
So what about that defense? Because just to kind of explain it, SGA is cooking everybody. You get in the pick and roll. To your point, you think Jokic in a playoffs defensively is just going to have more energy, focused, and effort at not letting Shea get around him on a screen. So that you get out to the outside, now you're beat, the whole defense is scrambling, and not allowing, so you're trying to string it out so the guy can recover, basically. The guard can recover over the screen. And then if you get stretched out too far, Shea, this is where he's absolutely killer, is he splits the defense, gets into the middle of the paint, and he's automatic from the middle of the paint, or you overcorrect and he's getting the kick out. So the defense now is, instead, we're going to send 2 guards all the way up at half court and just basically trap him with 2 guys at half court. So when he gets rid of the ball, the release valve is catching it at like the 3-point line, as opposed to the free throw line where now it's easy, the defense has to overcommit. So what does OKC do about that, if that is something that teams have kind of figured out about him?
I think that first off with Shea, like what you mentioned is exactly spot on because I dug into him last year and the split or the refusal of like when somebody's up to the level, basically you don't want Shea to be the one playing 4 versus 3. You want it to
Yeah.
be the screener. You want it to be Hartenstein. You want it to be, Chet. They're best when they get Caruso in that action because Caruso playing 4 versus 3 is their best decision maker, their best finisher. So like I think you're going to see a lot of that when teams get into the playoffs. And to me, that's what's going to be the Thunder's counter. They're going to want to get Caruso and J-Dub into that spot where when teams come up and try to blitz them, even the Denver thing, the Minnesota thing, it's all about who's going to be the decision maker in that 4 versus 3. If it's Caruso and J-Dub, I'm betting on the Thunder. If it's anybody other than those two, I feel pretty good about your chances in terms of what actions you're going to get off that.
And is there a way for Oklahoma City to force the 4-on-3 to be that guy? Because typically the only way you're going to get that trap off of a pick and roll is if it's the big, because otherwise it's a guard-to-guard screen and you're just going to switch it and say, okay, whoever plays. So how do you force it to be Caruso or J-Dub?
Yeah, I think 1, it's lineups. You need them to be in the game. And then 2, it's about kind of like, if it's the screen, it's about bringing them up to the level. And fortunately for Oklahoma City, a lot of times you'll see, this strategy was big last year, the funnel, whether it was Gobert or Porzingis, or this year Josh Hart is getting it, but you put your center on the worst perimeter player and you put, somebody else on the center who you want to switch action. So Caruso, a lot of times he's lowest on the level of those perimeter players for the Thunder. So a lot of times he's coming up to the action anyways, but I think it's more about, and Dead not so good at all this stuff, scheming when they see this in a series, who do we want to be in that pocket, recognizing it quickly, like as they're coming down the court and not letting it happen when there's 8 seconds on the shot clock, but more so 14, 15.
Right.
So you can actually let that advantage keep playing out.
Right. That's interesting. And the other thing about Oklahoma City, because I think Dagnot's a really brilliant coach as well. And one of the things he does or has his team do is, you talked about if he rejects the screen, you're cooked as well. So you have to almost like overplay to the side. But what they do is they set their screen so flat, not all the time, but a lot of times they'll send them so flat, you don't know if you're trying to send him left or right. The screen's coming up almost right below you. So this idea of don't let him reject the screen, you don't necessarily know which way the reject is and which way is the actual screen. So they're just really good with that. And as you mentioned, Denver was able to go to that trap and mitigate him. It's not even like he played a bad game. Denver just got the ball out of his hands and forced other guys to make decisions. And of course, last night it worked. It sort of took the teeth off of what Oklahoma City had such success with the night before. And, you get a fascinating one. I thought it was really interesting to see. I'm not a huge fan, Legs and I talk about this, I'm not a huge fan of the 2 games in a row in the regular season. But there are games like this, matchups like this, where it does feel like a mini playoff series where you get sort of an A/B test of strategies. And it's like, okay, that's interesting. File that away for the playoffs.
Yeah. I had Mike D'Antonio on my podcast a couple months ago, and he talked about this exact thing. He talked about building your Rolodex for the playoffs. Like, maybe we might want to see what this looks like on tape. So we're going to run it for, 8 possessions or 10 possessions and then file it away and we'll come back to it later. So I think you probably had a lot of that, and we'll never know what things they were really thinking about. You know what? We want to see this 4 times and we love it, so let's not show it again. We'll never know exactly what they were kind of like going with. And, Degnot's been so cool of being in his press conference. He's so open with like, hey, like I want to know everything about this team. And you never know. Like I saw the Minnesota game in Minnesota where he closed with 5 guards and he was like, I want to see what this looks like. And you don't know exactly what's beta tested right now and what's the real thing that they're loving. So if we get these 2 in a series, it would be absolute strategic gold and also narrative gold with SGA and Jokic.
It would be a really fun series. I think Oklahoma City has a good chance of being there. I don't know about Denver, but last night was one of their first big wins of the year. So, maybe a little momentum. All right, let's get right into this, though, because I want to talk about our main topic, which is these 4 teams that are so interesting right now. And we're going to start with the Golden State Warriors, who made the big swing to go get Jimmy Butler. Not even sure it was their first choice. I mean, I think they wanted Kevin Durant. That was highly publicized that they were going after him. He wasn't interested. They settle for Jimmy Butler. And what do you know? They're 12-2 with him, 5th in offense, 4th in defense over their last 15. Steph Curry, looking like Steph Curry again, 30 points per game, almost 70% true shooting, and they are just dominating the minutes when they get their death lineups out there. So tell me about it. Why is it that this team you believe is not just a good story, late season acquisition and a run, but a team that has the ability to upset an Oklahoma City, an LA, a Denver?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is when you get into these series, you always hear, people talking about the game. That was the best player in that series. That's why a team moved on. And Golden State absolutely knows who their best player is, and they know he can be the best player in every single series he's in. And every guy that's in that mold, they have a formula. Jokic's formula is different than Curry's formula, different than Doncic, different than LeBron, than KD, all these guys. And Golden State knows Curry's formula. And we've seen it over and over again. And what they were missing without Jimmy, they were missing this Iguodala-esque player who's rugged, can switchable on defense, can help hide Curry, is able to cut and reads when Curry draws gravity off of Green and Curry get actions and these things. So they were missing this little element to their formula that unlocks everything and really makes the machine run and amplifies Curry's special ability and is also amplified by his special ability. And so to me, the addition of Jimmy Butler is that extra. If Andre's the original, then Jimmy's the remix. And
Yeah.
it gives them this formula that they've always had success with, and they know how to scheme with this archetype of player on the court with Green and Curry and all these guys. So to me, that's the first jumping off point where you think this group has a chance because they know exactly what they're going to do. And Jimmy's cut from a championship caliber cloth. Like, he dragged Miami to the finals twice in the bubble and then against Denver in 2023. So I think that they're a group, when you get into a series, they're going to know exactly what they're looking for, and they're going to know how to hide their warts as well.
You just mentioned him, and just as you were talking, I hadn't thought about this, but Jimmy, obviously, Iguodala is a good comp. Very smart, can guard anybody, knows how to pass and play, make, and connect and read the court. But he also has a little bit of Andrew Wiggins in him in a way that that Iguodala didn't, and just that he can be a guy you throw the ball to. Like, Iguodala wasn't doing a ton of post-ups at his heyday in the depth
Right.
lineup or this or that. And Jimmy does give you that option. So it's almost like he checks the boxes of two molds that we know work for that Warriors
Yeah.
team and gives you both of those in one.
Yeah, and I love, one of the things that I love so much when you get into playoff basketball is how we were just talking about with the Thunder. How do you bring two to the ball? And where can you bring two to the ball, and what space is left over? And more so than all of that is who's making the decisions after you get this advantage. And to me, you're going to have these moments where Curry, for the whole year, and it plays out in the playoffs as well, he always leads the league in average distance a ball screen is set away from the hoop, because he has such a gravity and pull to him from his shooting and then also having the basketball. So right now he's leading the league at 29 feet away per pick and roll. And that's average. That's not just like deep one. So that's everything. And he's also fourth in the league in blitz percentage at 12%. So every single time he's running a pick and roll, it's so far away from the court. And then 1 out of 10 times or more, you're bringing two to the ball, and it's Draymond Green making decisions. It's Jimmy Butler making decisions. And I love the complementary pieces they have around him with Moody and Podziemski of decision-making on the offensive end. And then on the defensive end, you've really seen this growth from Moeses Moody, where he gets out there. He's an on-ball demon. He's willing to pick up full court. He has these long condor arms. He's covering up passing lanes. And to have all these guys out on the court with Curry, where they can be amplified by his shooting, by his gravity, but they can also cover up for him on the defensive end, playing in gaps, pre-switching actions to keep him out of it. All that stuff just adds up to really, really tough things for another team to try to isolate the Warriors' weaknesses, and then really simple actions for them to get into their strengths and put you in bad situations, rotations, and wide open shots given up. So I love the formula they have around Steph. They know it works, and I think they've actually tweaked it to the precise one they had pre-Kevin Durant. I think that's what Warriors team we're looking at.
Oh, wow. That's better even than the 2022 team then, I would say, because the 2022 team almost, they were good enough to get it done, and they had Steph Curry have his best playoff run, but even that was a team that had, it seemed, more flaws than the 2015 team. So you're almost liking him more to the 2015 team. in that way.
They can be pre or post Kevin Durant. I
Got
think the Kevin
just not
Durant
the Kevin
era is
Durant.
just it just stands on its own. Like
Gotcha.
they were a totally different beast. They were a different animal. They
Yeah.
were something the league hadn't seen. And I don't think you can ever compare another Warriors team and their formula to that because they won't get that. So I think this formula is the pre and post Kevin Durant formula. And it's something that works for them and they know they can go to and what works.
Well, we were just talking about the Thunder and who is the short roll guy who is making the decisions 4-on-3. Draymond Green. I mean, an underrated part about the Warriors is that Draymond Green is as good as anyone, maybe not named Jokic, at doing that, like receiving that pass and now knowing
Mhm.
where to go. And he does it without the benefit of his own individual touch, around the
Yeah.
basket or anything. But Jimmy Butler's also phenomenal at it. In fact, it's one of the things he's so good at is making those types of decisions of just reading where's the compromise at. I'm going to attack it and make the play. So that's another part of this is you have two guys now that if the ball finds an advantage, they're going to know what to do. And nobody, maybe outside of Jokic, but maybe not even him, creates that advantage more than Steph because Jokic has to touch the ball. Steph doesn't even have to touch the ball to create that advantage.
Yeah.
And so you're going to have two guys that are going to constantly be put in position to do something that they're uniquely talented at doing.
Yeah. I just don't think that I don't think there are a lot of teams like if Oklahoma City or the Lakers or Denver get into a series against Memphis or Houston, I think they're going to be able to solve those problems and present other ones. I don't think they're going to be pushed to the limit or they could lose. But any of those teams get into a series against Golden State, like you can absolutely lose to Steph Curry. Those guys
Yeah.
aren't, you can lose to Jimmy Butler. Like those guys aren't, they know exactly what they're doing. They have a lot of playoff wins under their belts. They have championships for all those Warriors guys. They know what they're doing. They're not going to be scared of any moment. So I think this team is just out of the puncher's chance contenders for me. This team is a cut above all the other ones. They're kind of in
Wow.
this in between category of their own. And I think the Jimmy Butler acquisition is so underrated. I don't know if this matters. I don't know if they talked about it before, but this is something that, as somebody who's played on a lot of competitive teams, I always think about as like, what are the relationships? What's the mentor mentee vibes like? Jimmy Butler played with Mike Dunleavy in Chicago. Like they have a real rapport and relationship. So all these problems that he's had, and Jimmy will be Jimmy, and I'm sure it will end not well at some point. But
Two,
right
3 years
now,
from now.
yeah. But right now, like they know each other on a real personal, deep level. And I think that there was probably some point of like, all right, man, like they could have this conversation where like you're coming here and this is what we need. Are you in or are you out? And I think that all that stuff matters when it comes to playoff basketball.
There's no doubt. What about some of the other guys though? Because as much as I love that group of guys, the rest of the roster to me is big question marks in this regard. And I love that you brought up Moeses Moody already because he's a guy that I actually really liked. You're probably not surprised by this because I like guys that can make reads, like the talent, the skill, the things that they have. There's like players have holes, role players have holes. But I like when a guy can read what are you supposed to do to help the team score. And I feel like he's one of those guys. I'm not surprised he's playing well in this new configuration. The smarter the team, the better the unskilled, smart players look. So I think to me, he fits that mold. Does he fit that mold to you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, his early restricted or early extension number looks great right now. I mean, they got him on like I think it's like 339 or something like he's a real starting player. And when you put guys like that out there, that I think he's also had this moment of self-awareness. And I love when guys have this moment of like, I'm not going to be the guy, but I know how to play with the guy. And like, if I make these simple actions, these simple reads, like good things are going to happen to me. And then I'm going to be on the court more and I'm going to find myself in all these advantageous situations. And I think he's done such a wonderful job of realizing, okay, the first thing I need to do is I need to be an absolute demon on the ball. I need to make
Yeah.
life uncomfortable. And the game against Brunson in New York, Brunson got some buckets, but like he's made life uncomfortable. And to me, that's a step number one of getting on the court. The next is always being in the right place at the right time, communicating on defense. And then the last one is you're talking about just hit singles every single time on offense. If the read is shoot, then shoot it. Shoot it in rhythm and on balance. If the read is drive, it's drive. If it's early help, then make the early pass. If it's late help, go finish it yourself. And if you can just make those yes or no reads as a talented individual who's playing with other great players that are going to give you advantages, really good things are going to happen. I couldn't be happier for a guy like that going through a few rough years and actually putting it all together and seeing himself like take those steps and those steps each and every game. So I couldn't be happier for a guy like that.
This is why role players are so funny, because oftentimes we look at like, oh, he can beat his guy off the dribble, so I like him, or he can shoot over a contested defender, and you go, I like him. But is he good enough to be the guy you want taking those shots? Because if the answer is
Mhm.
no, then that's a skill that is like not that valuable to you. Maybe once a game it comes out, maybe less than that. So then you have guys like Moeses Moody, who maybe you don't want doing those things. Great. He doesn't want to do them either. It's, can you make the basic reads and know where your shots are? And if a guy can do that, it's like, okay, now you fit alongside the guys that we do want doing those things. And to me, he fits the mold. A guy who doesn't fit that mold, although is a really talented player in a different way, is Jonathan Kuminga. How does he, like, what do you make of him? Where does he fit? And I guess him and Podziemski as well, like both of these guys.
I think Podziemski's a little bit different of category because I think he knows how to fit into their system. He knows his limitations as a player. And he's also a few years behind on the I need the bag schedule. So, this is a real thing. When you're on a rookie contract, like at some point, like you see your peers getting this cash and you're like, well, I need that cash too. I'm more talented than this guy. And so Kuminga, I think, has always fallen into that category where he's pushed and even pushed publicly of I need a bigger role, I need this, I need that, because you're looking out as like, okay, early extensions come in year 3, restricteds come in year 4. Like, I got to be ready to sign 150,
Yeah.
200, something like that. And I think that can really wear on players. So I hope that he gets it together for this run and kind of fits in. But Golden State is in the situation now with their roster and what they have cooking that he either comes
How do you
back
mess with
and
it? Yeah.
yeah, he comes back and fits in and leans into this, or the Kevin Love, he fits out. So I think he kind of goes into the breaking case of emergency. Like he's gonna have minutes,
Wow.
he's gonna have a role off the bench, absolutely. But it's gonna be something where like the Jordan Poole series against Sacramento a couple of years back, where it's like, look, man, you can play 10 minutes a game. It's okay. We're gonna play these other guys. And I think that if he doesn't lean into the things that they need to be successful as a team, it's going to be one of those situations. But if he does, I mean, he's uber talented, uber athletic. Like, there's not a better image for him to try to follow on their team than Jimmy Butler and what he does in that
Mm.
same role. So I think he's got all the tools in front of him to actually be a player that's highly valuable on this run that they're on. And he's a massive swing player for this puncher's chance category.
But to your point, the runway is so short, and Kerr did give this update 2 days ago. He says it's really difficult. It's a really difficult thing when you're playing really well and then you have a key guy coming back. It's always tough. So I think the idea is just to bring him along slowly, play him in short bursts, but keep playing guys like Santos. To me, that is, the writing is on the wall of like, hey man, we're going to give him a couple shots because we're playing so well. Everything's moving. The guys we brought in, Kuminga's better in a vacuum, but these guys are doing what we wanted Kuminga to do. So we'll give him a tiny little opportunity and see if he can fulfill it. And if not, get out, which is kind of crazy.
What a good
Is there
soft
anything?
launch.
What's that?
What a good soft launch there from Kerr.
I know. Yeah, just prepare everybody for, hey, man, I don't know. Is there anybody else on this team that you think is particularly interesting with regards to their upside?
I think you mentioned Santos. There's Quentin Post vibes. I don't know that those guys are going to factor like super heavily into like
Yeah.
you're a real rotation piece in the playoffs. I think they'll be in the breaking case of emergency category. To me, there's something about Buddy Hield's irrational confidence that in this role of like, hey man, if you get it going, cool. Like there's plenty of runway out there and you're gonna have shots. If you don't, like no problem. We'll go with Podziemski and Moody and like these guys for the majority of minutes. But Buddy Hield's one of those guys where Lou Williams-esque, Jordan Clarkson back in the day, one of those six mans that you think about, it's just instant offense, microwave scoring, and he can blow open any single quarter in a playoff game and flip it on its head. So Buddy's in that best irrational confidence guys for me in that category. So we'll see what he does, but I wouldn't be banking on like, you need to count on Buddy for 36 minutes a night
Right,
of like
right.
solid defense and all these like simple things. I think that's more Moody and Podziemski.
His role is also simple. I mean, he's out there to shoot when his shots are open to him, and he'll hit them some nights. And like you said, you're not counting on him to do it. But if he does have a night that he's capable of, 6 threes, it's like you're probably won that game. So his role is almost simplified there. They're really good. Who do you think, just as the last one on the Warriors, who do you think they are? like is Oklahoma City, Denver, the Lakers, is there a group of those teams that you think that's who they are designed to beat, or that is a team that is designed to beat the Warriors?
Mm. Well, I think Oklahoma City's an interesting one. I think their youth is a real thing in the playoffs, and I think one thing that makes me think Golden State matches up really well with them is the size factor. And you saw this last year in the playoffs with Hartenstein. He's not going to be a guy that posts with his size, but he's going to
Right.
offensive rebound the hell out of you. And so that's something that would give me a little bit of concern size wise. But I really do think that the Warriors could match up Green against Hartenstein and Butler against Chet, and all of a sudden you've kind of neutralized this size on one end, and on the other side you're creating a little bit more speed. You got things moving. So I think Oklahoma City could be a tough matchup both ways, like for the Warriors and also against them. But I would put them as like they're the team that sticks out as best equipped to beat Oklahoma City from this puncher's chance category. Denver, Lakers, like I think those teams are absolutely beatable. I don't think that Denver and the Lakers are like huge steps ahead of Golden State. So I think that
Yeah.
all of it's kind of all mixed in there for me. But to me, Golden State's one of those teams that if you told me that they beat every single team in the West and they were in the NBA Finals, I wouldn't be shocked. It wouldn't be what I would bet on, but I wouldn't be shocked if they were there.
It'd be insane for Steph, and just obviously we already think of him as one of the all-time greats, but to get another, it just felt like 2022 was the surprise. Oh, one last run year. If you get another one, it's just the guy is so special, man.
They were
Um,
pretty clear during All-Star, like, this is our last
oh
dance,
yeah.
like, this we're going for I think there's something that, like, in that, like, they all get it. They know their basketball mortality is here, and Jimmy included, he's no spring chicken, so, like, these guys, like, they have one last run in it, maybe this year, maybe next year, so, like, I think you're gonna see, the best version that they can produce right now as a team and as individuals.
This bracket season, FanDuel is letting you make the call because right now new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's 200 extra bucks to bet on everything from clutch shots to last second heartbreaks and even who's cutting down the nets. March Madness is the most fun thing, or one of the most fun. I think Super Bowl number one. March Madness might be number two, most fun thing to bet on. So that's 200 extra bonus bets from everything going on March Madness. It's a great time. Visit fanduel.com/all-NBA to get in on the college hoops action all tourney long. That's fanduel.com/all-NBA. Must be 21 or older, present in select states, 18 and plus present in DC. First online real money wager only. $5 first deposit required. Bonus issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets, which expires 7 days after receipt. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. FanDuel is offering online sports wagering in Kansas under an agreement with Kansas Star Casino LLC. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit fanduel.rg. Call 1-888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/chat in Connecticut, mdgamblinghelp.org in Maryland, or you can call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support in Massachusetts, or 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY in New York. Also want to tell you guys about Lucy. You can upgrade your nicotine routine if you're into that kind of thing with 100% pure nicotine, always tobacco free. They're available in pouches, gum, and breakers. Breakers are like pouches, but they have this capsule of liquid flavor inside that helps saturate the pouch. Breakers are available in 4 milligrams and 8 milligrams, and they have flavors like mint, berry, citrus, and espresso. And if you go to pouches, you can go all the way up to 12 milligrams. If you're not a pouch guy or gal, try that Lucy gum, available in 2 milligram, 4 milligram, and 6 milligram. And you can also get a subscription, so it goes straight to your door. Level up your routine with Lucy. Go to lucy.co/all-NBA and use that promo code all-NBA to get 20% off your first order. Lucy is offering free shipping and has a 30-day refund policy if you change your mind. That's lucy.co and use the code all-NBA to get 20% off. Always free shipping. And here comes the fine print. Lucy products are only for adults of legal age, and every order is age verified. Warning, this product contains nicotine. Nicotine is an addictive chemical. Let's move on now to the other team in the Western Conference that you've identified, and that is the Minnesota Timberwolves. And you actually came out with this. They're on a 5-game win streak right now. That's not why you did this. We were texting 2 weeks ago, and I asked you because I was down about the Nuggets and I was down about some of these teams, and you said, I don't know, Minnesota and Denver to me are still in it. So you have been on Minnesota even when they were on a losing streak. What is it you see about them that you think they are a playoff team?
Well, they're definitely a playoff team.
Well, I mean,
There's no
playoff
doubt about
performing team.
it. Yeah,
Playoff
yeah, yeah.
performing team.
Well, again, we talked about, like, do you have a formula? And I think I think they have a formula for Anthony Edwards. I think last year they saw it on tape, and Anthony Edwards last year was the most blitz guy in the playoffs. Steph wasn't there last year. Anthony Edwards led the playoffs in blitzes. He's number one right now in the league again at being blitzed. He's blitzed about 15% of the time on his pick and rolls. And to me, all of that led Tim Conley to say, we don't need a shooting big paired with him. What we need
Mhm.
is the guy who's going to then play 4-on-3 basketball, who's going to press this thing and make the advantages worth our while when teams bring two up to the level. And I thought the addition of Julius Randle, like, it's had some clunky moments, but I think it makes sense in terms of you have your best guy, you know what advantages he creates, and now you need that secondary guy that you know you can put in those advantage situations that's going to play really good basketball for you. And to me, that's Julius Randle over Cat. And I think they've done a great job of building these complementary pieces that amplify and are amplified by Anthony Edwards. So to me, that addition and the way their machine works, that's the thing that makes me think they get into a series. They know exactly what they're going to get to, and they know they can get to good stuff every single possession. And that's scary because not a lot of teams can do that. Know they can get to good stuff every single possession.
So it's interesting you say that because this is one that, again, I just surprises me a little bit because Julius Randle, as much as he is good at attacking downhill 4-on-3, I don't love his decision making in any circumstance, especially when he's catching it on the move. So why do you think he can be the decision maker there? If I'm scheming against that and that's the pressure point, I say we're going to overcommit to stopping him on the roll because I don't think he's going to make quick, good decisions over and over again.
Yeah. I think one thing that happens, and I've worked with a few guys who are at, a higher level in the league status wise. And sometimes they have these stretches during the year where they're hurt and they get to sit out. And
I
almost
like that.
every single time during that stretch, they get to see the game through a different lens and they get to see what positions they would be in. They get to see how their teammates evolve into different actions. And almost every single time per man, they always come back with a different perspective that is a lot more egalitarian in terms of this is what works for the team. This is how I can make my mark and help other guys. And then it's going to soften everything up for me. So let me give you Julius Randle in November, January, and December, right? So
Yeah, I love
early in the
this.
year. Okay. Early in the year, first 43 games, 4.5 assists, three
Yeah,
turnovers a game, right?
yeah.
He's creating 7.75 potential assists every game for those 3 months. Gets hurt, takes a step back, sits on the bench. Watch how the game moves with Anthony Edwards out there being blitzed, sees himself in the actions that Naz Reid would be in, sees Jaden McDaniels thrive as a five role man with Mike Conley, with Anthony Edwards, sees himself
So
be like,
good.
you know what? That's so simple. Like, I can do that. And once I start doing that, everything else is going to start trickling downhill for our team. Julius Randle, last 10 games since coming back, March, 5.5 assists, 2.3 turnovers, 9.8 potential assists a game. Sometimes sitting out and getting that perspective in season, being able to watch your teammates, being able to watch how the machine flows and see yourself in it, sometimes that can be all the difference in the world for it clicking or not clicking for a player.
This is why you're so good, Mark. I don't think that people are realizing this because what you're talking about is what a player can do, not what they actually do. You identify he can do this, and yes, he makes the mistakes. But to your point, through 48 games, he played 48 games to open up. He had one game with 9 assists and like 2 or 3 with 8. He's had 9 or 10 assists in each of his last 3 games. He
Yeah.
misses all that time. He comes back. He's been back for 5 games. And in that, he has 3 games that would be his season high in assists. So to your point, that's exactly what has happened, albeit a small sample size. We're talking about 5 games since coming back from the injury, but that appears to be exactly the lesson that he has learned, which is absolutely fascinating. Um,
And early in the year when we heard about the trade, Tim Conley says he continuously talks to Finch about what guys he likes, what guys he doesn't. He said, Finch said, I think Julius Randle's underrated. And he had a relationship before with him. And sometimes when you're not playing, you're able to have these conversations with the head coach, with other assistants that are way more 10,000 foot level than the ones when you're playing back to back and you're just seeing somebody for 1 second or another. You're able to look at the film in more of an off-season totality look, as opposed to like, hey, this is the coverage we're going to see tomorrow. Like, this is what we ran up against today. And that perspective that shift can mean everything for a player. So, yes, small sample size, but I would say that like after seeing it before, knowing what they probably talked about, seeing the difference of coming back on the court, they know their formula. And just like we talked about with the Warriors, sometimes it's all about knowing your formula and whether that formula make or miss, you know what you're going to get to. And to me, that's why Minnesota, and they're top 10 in everything for the year, O rating, D rating, net rating. Like they're a team that actually has a chance when they get into a series because they could have the best player. I mean, we saw Anthony Edwards go into
Right.
Denver and beat the Nuggets in game 7. Like they could
Right.
have the best player in every single series they run up against. And if they know their formula with that best player and he gives you some special performances, absolutely anything can happen for this team.
What about the other guys though? Because if Randall is making, playmaking here, you are talking on McDaniels making shots, DiVincenzo, Naz Reid, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Jalen Clark if he plays in the postseason. Those are all guys who collectively I think you can count on making shots, but no one individually I'd say, oh, he's for sure going to be efficient in this series or in this game. All of those guys, if you told me they had a bad shooting series, I wouldn't be surprised. So do you see that as a concern, all those guys I just listed?
It's the
And their
puncher's
shooting?
chance categories for a reason. These aren't the
Okay, that's it.
favorites. They got a
That's it.
puncher's chance, man. Like,
Okay.
so yeah, like if you tell me Dante DiVincenzo and Naz Reid are going to get all the shots, cool. Like, yeah, sign me up for that. Like those guys can absolutely shoot the ball. Nickeil Alexander-Walker, he can shoot it in certain situations. Like he gives you some good stuff. McDaniels, Shannon, Clark, like as you start going down the list, yeah, like we're getting a little rickety, but you're talking about, our sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth options on shooting the ball. But like the
Yeah.
guys that are going to be out there, you don't want Dante DiVincenzo getting open shots. Like that's not a
Yeah.
formula for success. You don't want Naz Reid getting open looks. That's not a formula for success. And if I know that I can get those guys looks and they start knocking it down, you're going to stop blitzing Anthony Edwards. You want to be on Edwards Island. Like good luck.
Yeah. That's interesting, man. Any other thoughts about them? And why you kind of believe in them? Is there anything we left out?
No, I think the Rudy thing it's interesting. He's obviously a key. If they go up against Denver, I would say Denver is their best matchup. We saw them beat them last year. I think OKC and the Lakers, they have stuff that would give them problems. We saw basically 3 games in February sandwiched around the All-Star break where they played OKC and all of them were just bloodbaths. Like they were
Mhm.
they were great games. They match up really well against them. OKC has some stuff that scares them. Minnesota has some stuff they can get to. I think that there's a part of me when I watch those games. I don't know if you feel this, but like sometimes you can just feel when guys have a little bit of juice, when they got a little bit of something extra. And Anthony Edwards does not like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. He just doesn't. He doesn't. There is something about when he plays him, like
I love that.
he has a certain level of like venom in his eyes. Like he'll, those passive aggressive looks, like he has them towards him. And that block meant something to him. They made the run, the 25-point comeback run. They made it with Edwards on the bench. I think those moments are big for all the supporting cast guys to feel confident. I think they have 2 really good break in case of emergency guys with Clark and Shannon. I mean, Shannon going downhill. Now he's going to get every single shot he wants in the playoffs, but Shannon going downhill is an absolute Mack truck. I mean, he
Yeah.
can get anywhere he wants to his left hand. So to me, they have all these guys that are interesting, and they also have done it before. Like a lot of these guys were on a Western Conference Finals team. Like they beat Denver in Denver. Like that's no small feat when they were the defending champs. So like these guys know what they're walking into. Like they have their stuff together in terms of what the mentality is to be great in the playoffs. And I think, if you know your top guy and you know your formula with it, like that's a recipe for success. And whether you win or you lose, like, it's up to the bounce of the ball, but they're going to be able to get good stuff and they're going to know what they're going to want to get to.
Well, you managed to do the unthinkable. You persuaded me on Julius Randle. I didn't think it was possible, but now I'm intrigued. I can't believe it. I can't wait to watch Julius Randle playmaking on the short roll. Let's move over to the Eastern Conference now because you identified 2 teams, the Bucks and the Pacers. Let's start with the Bucks. They're 7-3 in their last 10. They're likely to finish somewhere 4, 5, or 6. They do have an outside shot at 3, especially with Brunson, being out for the Knicks, them struggling a little bit. They play Indiana tonight in the first of 2 matchups this week, which should be really good. So what is it about them that you have so much belief in?
They can have the best player in every single series they play in with Giannis. I mean, he's truly an anomaly. There's nobody. in the world that moves like this man does at his size, at his strength, with his speed. So I think that when you think about, we've talked about having a guy and having a formula, like this team's won a championship. Now, granted, it was just Brook and Giannis, but they have this formula of like, hey, you know what? When we were at our best, this is what we looked like. And Drew and Dame is like a not a fair apples to apple comparison, but Dame brings something different than Drew in terms of gravity and spacing the floor. I think one of the things with this team that makes me so intrigued is they started off 2-8, and since then they're 34-19, 66-41 win percentage. Like since then, we're getting up there, O rating 12th in the league, D rating 7th, net rating 8th. Like we're a pretty good team, but when we get to the playoffs, the rotation's going to shrink, and I think a lot of the low hanging fruit that they're missing now, like they play a lot of minutes without Dame or Giannis on the court.
Yeah.
Like you look
Especially
at JJ Redick. Yeah, you look at JJ never had a minute without Luka or LeBron on the court when they were both healthy. So I think there's a lot of low-hanging fruit that is going to be able to pick this team up and kind of raise the floor of what they're in. And then when you get in a series and you have something like Dame and Giannis that you can go to, that you can create this gravity, this place where you can have either one of these guys can be the best player in a series. That's scary. I don't think that means that they're going to necessarily beat Boston 10 out of 10 times. But if you told me they played 100 times and they won 20 of them, no problem. Like I could easily believe that, because if Giannis gets it going, you have to create this shell. You have to create this wall for him. And it's going to lead to open shots. And Dame being out there is a totally different element than we've ever seen before with Giannis in the playoffs. And we didn't see them last year in the playoffs. And to me, that's why they're so intriguing. And that's why that combination, when you get into we're only playing this team 7 times, makes them one of the scarier teams in the Eastern Conference that we're not talking about.
Well, first of all, I want to talk about the point about them both being off the court, because Doc Rivers actually talked about this recently. They're playing minutes right now with Kevin Porter Jr., who's given him a boost lately, and Kyle Kuzma, who's given him a boost, and they'll play those two guys. It's almost like we have our 2 men, our top 2 stars, then we have our second 2 stars. It's a big gap, but they almost run to that as, and it's had success for them. And Doc Rivers was asked about it if they found something, and he basically goes, yeah, probably not in the playoffs, but it's nice that I can do that now. And it was almost like he was lobbed a softball question about like, hey, yeah. And he's like, no, that's just something we're doing so that I can buy more minutes for Giannis and Dame together. They're both resting together because they're trying to play more minutes together to develop that 2-man chemistry. And one, obviously the pick and roll, which I think has been underwhelming in the first year, but they're starting to now figure out that, like we all envision that being, how do you stop it? They're starting to get there. But what's most interesting to me, and I'm curious if you have a take on this, they're running a lot of like rip DHO action, which every team does, but they mix up where Dame is and where Giannis is. Sometimes Giannis is receiving that rip screen, so it's a back screen, Dame, little tiny guy, Giannis rolling to the rim, you create a switch. And sometimes Giannis is the handoff guy after the rip action, and you could run that for Kuzma, or you could run that for some of the other guys. And all of those actions, like they finally have a chemistry in them where you go, when you sit and watch it, you go, yeah, that would be hard to guard. That would be I don't know exactly what the answer is there.
Yeah, I think they found a little bit of a formula. When you filter it for top 100 combos and DHOs, they're third in points per direct. So handoff actions, like they're getting about 1.16, for every handoff. One of the things that concerns me about their handoffs, and you mentioned it, a lot of these actions happen really close to the rim. They're one of the worst options in terms of average distance. And we talked about this with Steph. They get their handoffs about 24 feet away from the rim. So basically at the 3-point line. And one of the things I would like to see them do is be able to stretch that out, because Dame has that same level of gravity, and it would give Giannis a little bit more space to attack downhill if he catches it in the pocket. So that's one thing. The thing you mentioned of what they're getting into and where they're getting into it and finding a rhythm, when I watch them, the biggest thing I see is they're starting to get to all these actions where it's Dame and Giannis or anybody else, where Giannis is the screener or the handoff guy. They're getting to him in empty corner actions. So Giannis isn't having to make these quick decisions on, am I passing to, the dunker spot? Am I kicking out? Like if I see help, they're putting it in actions where it's empty corner. So Giannis is thinking like, if I get this thing, it's beeline to the rim. And if I don't get it, it's because everybody's so scared of me on lobs or getting it that, Dame is getting a 3 or Dame's getting a floater or Kuzma's getting a floater in the lane. And while floaters aren't the best in terms of the analytical, spectrum of the game right now, they are really good in the playoffs when it's tough to get an open shot. If you can give me an open floater in a Dame and Giannis empty corner pick and roll every single time down the court, I'm going to take that over a really tough contested three or anything like that. So to me, it's about where they're getting to the help side. Like what's on the help side when they're getting to these actions. That's the thing that I've liked seeing the most about Giannis is seen as just a finisher, not finish or play make and read the court.
What about defensively? What is their upside there? Because obviously that was their calling
Oh,
card when they made a run, but what do you make of them now?
yeah, it's tough. I think there's a lot of combinations when I see Brook out there. It's one of those things like when you watch Cleveland, Cleveland looks at those guys and they just start licking their lips of like, hey, get Brook up here. Like bring him up to the
Mm,
action. Like we don't care who it is. Like let's get Brook in this thing. And I just wonder, like, I watched him play a few and I watched them try to string it out and help back. And then one time he just got stuck on an island. And I wonder if they actually go to, because Cleveland does this really well, not to sidebar, Cleveland does this really well on Boston. They've decided like we're just going to switch everything and we're going to not crack our defensive shell and we're going to let you shoot ISO threes. And if you make enough, great. And if you don't, like we're going to play the percentages. And I wonder if Milwaukee will start to do that with Brook because every time they try to show him or drop him, he's just a liability right now with his feet in the pick and roll. And so to me, defensively, that's the biggest concern I have with them because there's too many possessions where not only Brook, but like you'll see a jailbreak drive and all the guys, you'll see this one. They're just looking up. They're like, hey, somebody's supposed to be there. Like, is that your help? That's my help. That's your help. Aren't you supposed to stop the ball? There's too many of those possessions where everybody's looking around like somebody else is supposed to do it. So defense would be the place where I'm most concerned with those guys. And you would hope that like, okay, maybe it's a regular season thing, but I would like for them to show me for a couple weeks, like show me that you're actually like up to this level of like, we're going to be committed to knowing where help is. We're going to guard our yard, things like that.
As much as I want to buy into the Bucks, this one I have a hard time with, in part because unlike in the Western Conference where there's one juggernaut, the Thunder, there's two in the East, which means you're going to have to beat both of them. And I look at it and I go, Cleveland, they just don't make mistakes. They execute at such a high level, and they have guys that are really hard to guard one-on-one. Boston has five guys that present problems, but they also have, so I look at that and I go, I could try to buy into all the stuff you're saying, but I just can't buy in them doing that 8 times, 4 in each series to beat those teams, even given the advantages they have of having the best player in both series.
Yeah, I agree. I think seeding is going to be important. Where does it break? Like, who are they going to play? I think obviously Boston and Cleveland are going to be on separate sides of the bracket, and they're going to have to either of those teams in the East. You're going to have to go through both of them, and because
Yeah.
they're going to be in the second round, they're going to be there. So, to me, Boston is one of those teams where we've seen Boston drop games to Miami, right? We've seen
Yeah.
them, there's no team in the NBA that's better at creating an advantage and pressing it and feeling like all five guys can shoot it, we can dribble it, we can play make, we're smart. But there's also no team that's more open to wild swings of makes and misses in terms of they were up 25-3 on Cleveland. You're up
Yeah.
25-3. You think you're
You
going to
should
win that
win.
game. They don't lose that game, and it's not on a game winner. Like they lose it, it's pretty close, but Cleveland runs away with it. So there's no team that's more susceptible to makes and misses swinging their game. So, Boston gets in one of those, and who knows? Cleveland, I like Cleveland a lot. I like Boston a lot, but they haven't done it before. It's not like we're
Mhm.
looking at a team that we know like Minnesota, where they've been to the finals, or Luka's Dallas team where they had been to the final Western Conference Finals before and then made the finals. Like Cleveland's won one series against Orlando, and it took them 7 games. So,
Man.
if you want to tell me that yes, Cleveland's amazing, but if you want to tell me that they lose to Milwaukee because they're not up to snuff when it comes to the place, well, we've seen them fall short before. So until they prove it, I think that yes, they should be respected, and they're a great team, and I really love what they're doing, and I would pick them in a series. But it's possible that it kind of crumbles a little bit when they get into a playoff. I don't think it will, but it's possible.
Yeah. And just so everybody's clear, because I know the Cleveland fans will now hop in the chat and say, hey, like, come on, man, they've lost 10 games all year, and it's all fair. But to your point, if you're Milwaukee and you match up in a second round with Cleveland, game one becomes extra important. Because if you can steal game one, that's when this conversation takes place for the next 72 hours. And not only the conversation, but Cavs themselves are starting to feel like, oh my God, we only lost 10 games all year. We just lost game one.
Yeah.
Those are things that the experienced teams have all been through and have something to fall back on. And Cleveland, as great as their regular season is, It goes to 0-0 the moment they go to the postseason. The last team here, and look, I respect the hell out of you. I respect the hell out of Legs. You both love the Pacers, and they're another team I just don't quite see it with. So talk me into them.
Okay. We have a formula. There's a theme here. If you're in the puncher's chance category, and for the Cleveland people, like, Cleveland's awesome. Like, I love Cleveland. I love what Kenny Atkinson's doing. I love Garland and Mitchell, playing off of each other. They're incredible. So it's no shot. But like, these teams that we're talking about, they have a formula and they know what they're doing when they get into playoff basketball. And so Indiana, they have a formula. They have an offensive engine that we have seen it before. We know creates incredible playoff offense, and it's Tyrese Haliburton. And they have the things off of his offensive engine that complement him. They have the things that he complements. And so to me, the Indiana love is based on A, the formula, knowing what we have and what we're trying to do, and B, past all the pick and roll stuff with Turner and Siakam and all the decimals of points per possession, all this other stuff. They have the dude that is just like that small piece that makes the whole machine go, and it's Andrew Nebhard. And when Andrew Nebhard is on the court with Tyrese Haliburton, it is a totally different Pacers team than when he's not. And to me, he's one of those X factor guys that when he's out there and it's going, man, does it work. And they get in a series and they got a chance if like those guys are out on the court together.
Why does he make it work? What is it that he does? The connecting passes?
He does absolutely everything. And that doesn't mean he's great at everything, but he knows exactly where the hole is that he needs to plug. And just to give you an idea, like, this is cleaning the glass. When him and Haliburton are on the court together, and this is no small sample size, this is 2,264 possessions. Like, this is a lot of possessions. They're plus 10. Over those 225, all those thousands of possessions, they're plus 10. That's 90th percentile. And to me, it's the dirty work. It's, okay, Tyrese is getting dogged 94 feet. Cool, I'll bring it up. No problem. Now, all of a sudden, we're getting into stuff where Tyrese is coming off a pin down and then going into a ball screen. So we've got action going before. You can't load up and key on him. Tyrese has the ball and he's pushing. Great. I'm running the court. I'm shooting spot up jumpers. I'm making good reads off a closeout. On defense, if anybody out there doesn't know who Caitlin Cooper is, like,
she's the best.
You should know. Yeah, you need to know her now, because if you go through any of her threads, you will see exactly how important Andrew Nebhard is to their defense. He is one of the best communicators, both verbally and also non-verbally, of dissecting exactly what's going on, knowing where the hole is going to be and where he needs to plug it. And his level of dirty work, his level of self-awareness of where he's at in the food chain, his level of selflessness in terms of leaning into his role, his enthusiasm for what he's supposed to do, it unlocks everything that this Pacers team does, and it makes them so scary when you get in a series, because there's nothing scarier than a team where they all have role definition, role acceptance, and role enthusiasm. And this team knows exactly who they are, and that's terrifying.
I have to go on a little Nuggets tangent, short one, little here, because I love what you're saying about Nebhard, and he's exactly that player, just smart and knows exactly what the team needs of him. Not necessarily what he can do, but what the team needs for him to accomplish on any given possession. This is why I love Jalen Pickett, and I don't know how much you've gotten to watch him, but to me, he's almost a smaller version of Andrew Nebhard. Both guys can't really beat guys off the dribble, that they're not dynamic in that way or do these things. But I just love the idea. Yoke's a greater version of Haliburton in a lot of ways, and Pickett's a lesser version of Nebhard. But it's the idea of giving a great player, a great playmaker, one guy who also knows what's going on at that level, not just running the plays, but is reading the court. And when you give that guy, he becomes a guy that helps set the table. And so I imagine that's kind of what you're getting at here, is just having a second guy to go and carry out and execute the off-ball things while your main engine is executing all the other stuff. That's the dynamic.
Yeah, and I think there's so many plays where they see the game through the same eyes, and it's not only like that, but it's also the burden that it takes off of the big playmaker, Jokic or Haliburton in this situation, mentally. Physically, yes, you don't have to do it, but mentally, you don't have to do it. You just have to get to this place. You know that your counterpart here is not only going to be safe with the ball and we're not going to be in a turnover situation, like we're going to get a shot, but they're also going to see like what is the coverage and what do we need to get to? Like you're not going to have that pause. One of the things that kills offenses is when you see somebody other than the primary playmaker, who's the engine of the offense, dribble for like 2 seconds out at the top of the key and it stops the offense and this machine stops moving and it comes to a screeching halt and they're like looking around and it's like, oh, screen got top locked or something. They're like, well, that's where I'm supposed to throw the ball. So what do I do now? And sometimes like it's as simple as just knowing what you're supposed to do that keeps the machine moving and keeps this advantage going. And so, since the All-Star break, Hallie's been lights out. I know he's sitting right now, but lights out. 24 points, 3 rebounds, 12 assists, 12-1 assist to turnover ratio, just out of control stuff. Slashing at 60, 55, 100. I mean, just get out of here. 5-2 over that stretch. But over the course of the year, out of the top 100 pick and roll combinations, they have the third best and the fourth best. Hallie and Turner, Hallie and Pascal. 1.2 on one of them, 1.184, and they set the screens far away from the basket. Like this is one of those things where these guys know what they're doing. They really do. And they gained so much experience last year of playing in these situations. And if you tell me that like there was a time where the Boston series was 2-2, I believe you last year because they were in every single one of those games and a few balls bounced one way or another. Like who knows what that looks like. So to me, yes, it's going to be difficult for either one of these teams in the East to go through Cleveland and Boston. Like that's a monumental task. I don't see either one of these teams coming out the way that I could see a team from the West coming out like the Warriors. But if you tell me Indiana gets Boston or Cleveland, one of them, one time, sure, I'm buying.
So last one I have for you here is you just said Cleveland, who's 54-10. They don't have the experience. You got Indiana, who's 35-28, but they do have a Eastern Conference Finals appearance. So do you think that experience is meaningful in this instance? So like they should give them a confidence boost or an experience boost that you're referencing?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, these guys are the same team as last year. They know what it's like when their back's against the wall. Like the Nebhard shot, he had an awful game against the Knicks. Couldn't make anything. Like 0 for 7. Hit a game-winning 3. Like, it bounced maybe 5 or 6 times, but like there's something about these guys being battle tested and knowing they know exactly what they're getting from the guy next to them. Like they know the level of sacrifice that it's going to take from each one of them, not only like mentally of leaning in, but physically of what it's going to take for them to get stops on the defensive end, the commitment it's going to make. And they have a guy who's been a champion before. Like Pascal's been a champion. This guy is one of those Swiss Army knives that he doesn't grow on a tree. Like it's 6'10", can handle the ball, can shoot the ball, can post, can take advantage of switches. Like I like to think of pick and roll as there's, a ball handler and a screener. And in the screener, like there's 5 tools that really, really beat a defense. And he's a 5-tool big. He can stretch the floor going downhill in the roll. He can stretch the floor as a shooter to space. He can play make in the pocket. He can finish in the pocket. He can post a smaller switch. Like if you can do those 5 things as a screener, you're a menace to deal with. And he's capable of doing those things. He's capable of running offense through him at the elbow. And they have the complementary parts that know what they're doing. And there's something about that when you get in a series, and what you mentioned about the Bucks being up 1-0 and all the questions, there's something about that when the chips are down, like they know exactly what they're going to get from the guy next to him, and that matters.
Well, I love it, man. I don't know if you convinced me the way you did about Julius Randle's playmaking, but they did do it last year, so we'll see if they can make a run to the conference finals again. I'm curious what other people think too. Let us know in the comments below. Of the 4 teams we talked about, Warriors, Wolves, Pacers, and Bucks, if you order those most likely to come out of their conference, I'm curious what people would say. I imagine most people are like you, Warriors, because they got Steph Curry. They've done it before. But I'm curious behind that. Just are people buying the Bucks? Are they buying the Pacers? Are they buying the Wolves? I'll be interested to see that. He is Mark Campbell. I mean this sincerely, Mark. You're one of the best in the biz. I always learn something from I text you, I call you. I always learn something from you, and you have a really good way of breaking it down. You are at Low Man Help on Twitter. You also could find him on his YouTube channel, Low Man Help, and his Substack, Low Man Help. Anything I missed?
Nah, that's it, man. Thanks for plugging.
Yeah, the permanent sub. Mark Dagnott, a permanent sub of the All-NBA show. Legler is back on Thursday, as am I, guys. We're going to see you then. We should have some great games to talk about. Hit that like button for us on the way out, and we'll see you next time.